Let me ask you about your lighting techniques. How closely did you work with Russell Boyd, the cinematographer, and I'm wondering what kind of perhaps research into the club scene in Sydney that you did to achieve the end result?
Well, I think, I mean, I generally tell them what I don't want rather than tell them what I want. And we worked around each number individually. We did talk about, I mean, obviously Russell was very excited having a chance to do Starstruck because most Australian films are very naturalistic, and he was delighted at the chance to do something that was very theatrical. And he and the gaffer, and you know, he'd talk about, you know, it's like a normal working relationship. You know, he'd throw up ideas about how about this or whatever, and also work very closely with the designer. I mean, Russell saw the sets early on, and also saw the costumes and so on. So we talked about things like Temper Temper. I mean, he had the lyrics of the song. He knew what it was about, and he'd seen Joe's costume in the red. And he came up with the idea of having her all in red light and so on. I mean, it's one of those things you look back and you often can't remember who came up with the inspiration. Even maybe the costume designer said, you know, it'd be great to have her in red light there.
It was quite an elaborate production design in the film overall.
Yes.
The thing that immediately comes to mind is the Lizard Lounge scene with the palette in the back.
Yes, well that was Brian Thompson, the designer's idea, and he had the neon palette lit up and made specially. He actually, when he was researching shock treatment for Jim Sharman, it was going to be shot on location in Dallas, and he took a photograph, and that was copied from something that's outside of a cinema in Dallas. So they never used it in shock treatment, but he brought the picture back, because shock treatment ended up being all shot in a studio, and had it made up. Brian is a bit of a neon freak.
Prior to a brilliant career, you worked. You did some short films. You worked, I understand, as an editing assistant. I know in the United States, women in film often begin in the editing room. Is that a similar case in Australia?
No, well, most women in film are in the production side of film, continuity production assistants. And generally, I mean, at the moment I'm the only woman who's directed a feature, although there's another one planned to go. Most of the women in the Australian film industry are producers. I mean, in powerful positions this is, and they've generally come from the production side, or else it's that thing about being a producer. If you actually have enough nous, anyone can really walk out and buy the rights to something and get it together. But I mean, I've always been grateful that someone gave me the advice to start in the cutting room, because I really think in the Australian film industry particularly, it becomes very dead-end. Production assistants, continuity people rarely make it to the other side, and I've found, even talking to people on that side of the camera, that they're frightened of the technical side because they've never been in an editing room. They don't know what happens in post-production. They don't know really about sound either. Everything's learnt from a textbook. So I think it really helped me that my training came from the craft side of filmmaking.
Would you comment on the state of the Australian cinema, and it's a very healthy, thriving cinema?
Well, it's not exactly at the moment. It's been going through a few ups and downs. The last year only 4 films were made, and at the moment it seems it's very tough to get money. But we're hoping there's been a change in the tax law, which we hope will now help that situation. But no, last year was dreadful, really dreadful, and it's quite worrying, because the thing is, most of the leading respected filmmakers are the ones that are having the problems getting the money together. It seems to be moving into the hands of the financiers, which is unfortunate, and I hope it doesn't continue that way.
Is there also the instance of, for example, some of the directors and actors, say Peter Weir, Skepsy, Mel Gibson, coming to the United States to make films? It seems to be almost a raid by Hollywood on.
Yes, well, there definitely is a raid. I think Hollywood's traditionally brought up talent around the world, and I mean, Fred Skepsy does live here now and is making pictures here. Bruce Beresford's made one, and Peter Weir has probably used Hollywood better than anybody, because he got American money and made the film in Australia. Well, it was in Asia, but it was basically an Australian script and with all his old crew. But I mean, I don't think there can be any rules about where people work. It's really up to the individual. And there certainly are directors who I'm sure find that, I mean, Hollywood is really, I suppose, the pinnacle of the English-speaking filmmaking world. And to a lot of directors, you know, the thought of being able to make a film in Hollywood is their answer to their dreams. Not to mine, but there are too many.
What are you up to next in terms of production?
Well, I've got 3 scripts that I'm working on now, but they're not in the stage where I'm boasting about them yet.
I'm wondering about some of your earlier short films. Is there an opportunity for American audiences to see them?
Well, the longest of my short films, an hour-long film, The Singer and the Dancer, is distributed. There's a guy in San Francisco who has it with a package of other hour-long Australian films, I think, which do the campus circuit. He keeps sending me these statements that say they've made and costs have been totaling naught. But apart from that, the other short films haven't been shown here, no.
Is there a cable television industry in Australia?
No, not yet. Cable hasn't come to Australia yet. So that'll probably open up a few doors.
You mentioned that some of the, you screened some films for Starstruck. I was wondering if there were any particular cinematic influences in the film. Well,
I mean, it's that thing of, I mean, actually there were more people involved in Starstruck who know and love musicals more than I do. I mean, Stephen McLean, the scriptwriter, is an obviously a total Judy Garland, Mickey Rooney fan, and grew up watching and knowing and loving films, the old Hollywood musicals. And so did one of my producers, Richard Brennan, loves musicals. And so I had a lot of influence from them all. I had Brian Thompson saying, you know, you've got to see Pajama Game, it's the best design ever in a musical. And then I had David Atkins, choreographer, saying, you know, West Side Story and Cabaret, to his feeling, were the best choreographed films, and I quite agree with him there. So I really saw them all. I just had 2 days of watching them, and then I said to David, now we walk away and forget about them all, and we don't copy anything, we just do our own thing.
It seems that many youth-oriented films seem to be condescending to adults, and that's not the case in Starstruck. The adult characters have kind of, you know, real lives of their own.
Yeah, well, that was always in the script. I mean, I think Stephen writes with great love for people and all his characters. And I mean, it actually is quite autobiographical, this story, even though it's a fantasy. The scriptwriter grew up in a pub, and his mother was a barmaid, and he, as I said, was the little boy that dreamed of stardom. And well, then it was Hollywood, so he just translated it. And Angus now dreamed of the rock world, because I mean that's really that's the stars of today.
What would you say was the most difficult scene to shoot in the film?
Well, it's hard because actually a lot of them were very hard. Probably the Monkey and Me, which we shot on stage at the end, only because of the time factor, because we had the audience for such a short amount of time. I had to shoot it like a documentary, which is not the way I normally shoot features. I mean, all my wonderfully designed, clever, arty shots were out the window, and it was, how do I get 3 cameras going at once, and you know, how do I work out how to hide 3 so you don't see them in the other shots? But in retrospect, at the time, I felt, you know, I hope this isn't going to kill this film, and that, you know, this is our finale. But in retrospect, it actually meant that, because we had to run the whole scene like a play, and just, you know, and we did 3 takes. That was it, of the whole end. And I had 3 cameras each time, and moved them to 3 different positions. So now next time you watch it, you can start counting. I do. I just see, oh no, there's that shot again. But I think it finally worked very well for the film, because it was, those kids just went crazy. It became real. And when you hear 1,200 kids screaming like they were, I mean, the adrenaline that came on stage, I mean, all the kids in the band, and Joe and Ross, were really felt, I mean, it was happening. I mean, the first time we walked in there, and they'd been told what the story was and so on, and I went out on stage and said, when this guy walks on the stage, is Terry Lambert, you know, he's a famous rock star and you love him, so when you see him scream, and he walked on, they screamed, we were just knocked back. Plus, you know, they learnt that dance, and they were totally on their own, so they were learning that. We only had them for an hour every morning before we were shooting. And every time we changed cameras, the choreographer was out there again and teaching them all this dance. And I mean, that was fantastic in the end, because they were absolutely on their own. We couldn't hide a choreographer demonstrating how to do it, nobody to copy. because the cameras are everywhere at every angle. So they were totally on their own, unpaid school kids. You know, they could have just all mucked up, and it finally became, I mean, just being there was exciting. It was real. You know, she came down the star and they were screaming and cheering, and I think that energy came through. So probably if I'd been there for 6 days doing it my way, you know, with all these clever shots and everything, it would have been a lot flatter.
On the scene where Joe is doing the tightrope between the buildings, what were some of the difficulties?
Oh, that was difficult. That was difficult too. Yes, I forgot about that one. Well, that was very difficult. We had it really planned in 3 stages of, you know, we'll do all the shots from this level, and then there are all the ones looking down, and then, you know, all the ones that look up, and because it's something like that, and you can't be running up and down, obviously, and trying to work out when to get the most out of your crowd when they're there. And obviously, I mean, it was the first time I'd ever used a stunt person in a film, and that was a bit nerve-wracking too. I mean, I just felt terrible, this person going up doing this thing for me. Thought, God, it's only a movie, and here's someone, you know, about to jump between tall buildings in a single bound.
Have you worked at all in video?
When I was at film school, we did a director's TV training course that was, you know, studio direction with 3 cameras and so on, and I hate it. I think it's, well, I mean, directing that way, where you really, you know, you're planning for 3 cameras shooting simultaneously.
And you're in another room, and it's not...
Yeah, I mean, I can't bear not being able to talk to people and have to do it through a floor manager, and also I feel it's the medium of compromise, because you have to light for 3 cameras, so you can't actually... I mean, I like to frame every shot and really make them right before I roll, and, you know, it's just, to me, it's hit and miss. You're lucky that you get anything that's any good, I think.
How was the film school experience for you in Australia?
Well, I had 2 film schools. I'm actually a double graduate. The first one I went to, I was very young, and it was part of an art school, and there was a lot of mucking around in those days. But when I look back on it, I think it was probably very good grounding, because it was a creative base. It wasn't a technically proficient school, but there was a lot of insistence on you and your own creativity and originality. And now when I look at the National Film School, which has started since I was training, that's much more technically based. And all we did was, you know, we just had this funny old art school, and they ran old movies, and we had a few, you know, eccentric lecturers, and we made our own films. We came out generally absolutely unemployable in the actual industry, and that was a rude shock to all of us. Not that any of us came out thinking we'd be directors, but we couldn't even, you know, be clapper loaders. And then the second course I did was a post-grad course of 1 year as a director, and that was fantastic, just because of the money and time. But that course only ran for 1 year, and Phil Noyce, who made Newsfront, was in the same year as me.
Okay, now that it's been a couple of years since you did My Brilliant Career, and you have a little distance between you and the film, what are your feelings in retrospect about it?
God, I try not even to think about it. I mean, I'm afraid I always walk away from my films totally disheartened, disappointed. I find it hard to even walk into a screening. If I even hear the soundtrack through a door, I cringe. And I walk away every time thinking, well, no, I hope I don't make those mistakes again. Obviously, there are a few moments that you're pleased with, or you may, I mean, like I was definitely never regretted casting Judy Davis, and I feel the same way about Ross and Joe in Starstruck. But I actually haven't seen it for years. I can't bring myself to. I've seen the pillow fight sequence, which is one of my favourite sequences that was once run on a program, and I was quite interested to see that. I could sit through the pillow fight, but I couldn't sit through the film. I do actually think that it was probably a little overpraised for what it was at the time, but I mean, the things that I'm pleased about are Judy's performance and Don McAlpine's lighting, which was really brilliant, and he really worked hard for me on that film. And other things like that. The people who worked for me, I'm delighted with what they did, but then when I assess what I did, I think, oh, it's too slow, it's too stagey, and You know, I mean, I know all the things that went wrong. You know, I see their final love scene and think, why did I do that on that day when they were both in bad moods and couldn't stand each other anymore? I can see that it's coming through, and you know.
And one last question on Starstruck. The album is currently in release.
Yes, it's just about to come out on A&M Records, the Oz label.
Yeah, well, Gillian, thank you very much for coming on the show, and best of luck with Starstruck.
Pleasure. Thank you.